While Event Horizon will most likely never get a sequel, the 2009 sci-fi horror film Pandorum is a sort of spiritual sequel. There's going to be some major spoilers here, so if you haven't seen Pandorum yet, I highly recommend you check it out first, especially if you liked Event Horizon. The first thing is that both movies were produced by Jeremy Bolt. On top of that, Pandorum was also produced by Paul W.S. Anderson, who directed Event Horizon. Event Horizon took place in 2047, and Pandorum takes place in 2174. In Event Horizon, it's never specifically said why they were developing wormhole technology. In Pandorum, Earth is overpopulated, and it's a 123-year trip to the nearest Earth-like planet. It's possible that after the Event Horizon mission failed so spectacularly, they decided to focus on ships that could withstand space travel beyond a century. There's also a few similarities in the way they were shot. The camera flies over the ships and into the cockpit in both films. The hypersleep chambers are a combination of the pods from Event Horizon and the main window of the ship. There's even frost buildup on both of them. Both films are sci-fi horror. Both films dealt with madness. Both films were about space travel that went horribly wrong, and both films are heavily influenced by Alien. Beyond the theory of it being a spiritual sequel, Pandorum still stands on its own. In 2005, Christian Albert directed a movie called Antibodies. It caught the attention of producer Jeremy Bolt, who was looking for someone to direct a sci-fi horror script he had acquired. The script was about the prison ship Pandorum that was transporting thousands of criminals to another planet. They showed the script to Albert, who immediately noticed it was similar to a screenplay he was writing called Nowhere. He presented the script to the producers, and they decided to combine the two into one. While trying to get funding, the studio had a list of actors they would need in order for them to get financing. At the top of the list was Dennis Quaid. He liked the concept of the film, and that he'd be playing a role that was different from his previous works. The reason why they wanted Quaid was because he was so well known for playing a hero, and they wanted an actor that no one would suspect to be the bad guy. Case in point, right after he finished filming this, he went off to play Hawk, the leader of G.I. Joe. They hired Ben Foster as Bauer, Cam Gigande as Gallo, Anji Trao as Nadia, and Kung Lee as Man. Lee was an MMA fighter, so they made sure to put in a fight scene to showcase his abilities. In the scene where the hunters are eating a passenger who's just waking up from hypersleep, the passenger was played by John Foster, Ben's brother. Norman Reedus had a small part as Shepard. I heard a lot of people complain that he was underused. What they failed to realize was that he made this 2 years before his popularity exploded by joining the cast of The Walking Dead. The creatures weren't CGI. They were contortionists in full body suits. The only CG they used on them was to make the leader of the hunters appear as if his nose had been bitten off. The lead hunter is played by Andre Heineke, who also played the captain at the beginning of the film. The child hunter was played by the director's daughter. They changed the name of the ship from Pandorum to Elysium. They made Pandorum the name of a fictional disorder called orbital dysfunctional syndrome. Essentially, space madness. The movie was now a Noah's Ark of sorts. They had a massive ship with 60,000 people of various races from all over the Earth. They were headed to colonize the planet Tanis, the closest to Earth's atmosphere. They also had DNA samples of almost every species of life on Earth that they were bringing along with them so they could clone them once they got onto the planet. The 60,000 people were put into hypersleep since the trip was 123 years long. They had a few different crews that would take shifts running the ship for 2 years at a time. At the start of the movie, 2 crew members, Corporal Bauer and Lieutenant Peyton, come out of the hypersleep because something's wrong with the ship's reactor. They designed the ship like it was alive. The hulls were like a rib cage, the cables were the veins, the power surges were the pulse, and the reactor was the heart. Much like the movie The Relic, Albert wanted the movie to be dark. The movie was so dark, in fact, that he had to sign a waiver stating that this was how he wanted it. That way he couldn't later blame the crew for it being too dark. He wanted lights and colors to play a prominent role, which worked much better with dark scenes. Yellow was good, and blue was evil. Stan Winston Studios did the makeup effects and designed the corpses. They ran into trouble when the first corpse was stuck in customs on the way from the US to Germany, where they were filming. They almost didn't get it in time for the shoot. Albert wanted coming out of hypersleep to be a painful experience. The skin that Bauer's peeling off is supposed to be his own. In hypersleep, they had no way of stopping skin cells from growing, so he's covered in layer upon layer of dead skin. The white set was an homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey. They shot the film in Studio Babelsberg in Germany for about $40 million. The movie opened on September 25, 2009, in 6th place, and only pulled in $20 million in its theatrical run. This was blamed on a terrible ad campaign, and most people had heard nothing about the film when it was released. The studio, Overture Films, had sunk everything into Pandorum and had no money left for marketing. Albert stated there's a longer director's cut, but with how poorly the film did, there's no interest in releasing it. Years after it hit home video, Facebook fan pages began popping up in the hopes of spreading the word about the film and possibly getting enough attention to warrant a sequel. As much as the fans want it, it's not looking very likely. The movie does benefit from a second viewing, but it still explains itself well the first time. Although it's disappointing that so many people called it stupid and claimed it didn't make sense. It made perfect sense. It was just told in small doses as Bauer was remembering things. They used his amnesia to gradually explain things to the audience. As I said earlier, the crew had 2-year shifts in command. When Bauer and Peyton awake, it seemed like they were 8 years into hypersleep instead of 2. This is why they had amnesia. They weren't designed to be in hypersleep for that long. Bauer's really the older version of Gallo. Years earlier, Gallo was overtaken by Pandorum. Gallo was driven insane because while he was on his shift, they discover some catastrophe happened, and Earth's been destroyed. So the people on the ship are the last surviving members of the human race.
You're all that's left of us.
He killed his crewmates and woke up some of the sleeping passengers. He locked them away in a part of the ship so he could play God. In his delusion, he saw the humans doing to Tanis what they did to Earth, so he forced them into a state of cannibalism to survive.
They fucked up our planet. Life eats life.
He saw the only way to prevent what happened on Earth from happening again was to take the humans back to their basic primal instincts. During the trip, the crew and the passengers were fed an enzyme that would help them to adapt to new environments. As time went by and Gallo was manipulating them, their bodies evolved to adapt to their surroundings. After years of playing God, he puts himself back into hypersleep, since he feels his job was done. His plan was to leave the humans to evolve into what he perceived as a superior life form. When he wakes up, he plans on releasing his seed that'll create a new world without the baggage of the old world.
This ship is the seed from which we can create a new world.
He's wearing Peyton's uniform because his was worn through after wearing it for so long. Peyton and Bauer both wake up because the power surges on the ship are getting worse. Bauer meets 2 others on the ship that were released because of the power surges, but were strong enough to survive. Nadia's been cloning food for herself in the lab, and Kung has been hunting and eating the hunters. When they find Leland, he explained what happened, and shows people with energy emanating from their heads. This is to signify who has Pandorum, as we see Gallo like this towards the end. He almost gets Bauer to succumb to Pandorum, but he snaps out of it at the last second. When Peyton wakes up, he doesn't remember that he's Gallo. As the film progresses, we see Peyton in yellow light and Gallo in blue. The blue is to signify the people who've succumbed to Pandorum. That's why the cannibals are walking around with blue gas torches. When he starts to remember his past, Gallo, his subconscious, gradually moves closer and closer to him until his memory's restored. In the end, when Peyton remembers he's Gallo, he opens the ship's blinds to see nothing but darkness. He's not a navigator, so he thinks they're hopelessly lost in space. But really, the ship made it to Tanis on schedule and landed itself underwater. When we see the water dripping from inside the ship, it's just chalked up to many sci-fi movies that show this as moisture buildup. However, this fools the audience, because it's really the ship leaking water from the outside. There's also algae building up inside the ship, which is one of the things that helps Bauer to realize where they are. They discovered the ship landed here 800 years ago, so it's 923 years after they left Earth, making it the year 3097. The cannibals on the ship are not the passengers or the crew, but the descendants of them. After years of living in low-light conditions, eating the weak, or the passengers unfortunate enough to be released by the power surges. They evolve faster over generations because of the evolution enzyme the ancestors were fed. In the beginning of the film, they show Bauer trying to break open one of the life pods, and how it was virtually impossible to do so. This was intentionally shown, because if the pods were easy to get into, the cannibals would have broken in and ate everyone, so there wouldn't be any survivors. In keeping with the Noah's Ark theme, there's a hull breach, and the evil in the ship is drowned in the flood, while the good, Bauer, Nadia, and the handful of survivors, manage to escape to the surface of Tanis. This is one of those movies that's unfortunately written off as dumb, but if you look just a little deeper into it, you'll find it's the furthest thing from that. It explains itself just well enough to keep you guessing, until the reveal at the end. The movie's a lot smarter than it gets credit for. I'm glad to see it's got a cult fan base that's been growing over the years. A sequel would be great, but it would be quite different from the first movie. It'd be more about the survivors trying to establish a new life on Tanis, which I'm sure would have monsters of its own to contend with. Perhaps some alien dinosaurs? Although if that was the case, it would turn more into a space-age Jurassic Park. Pandorum is a fantastic movie. I have a feeling that, much like Event Horizon, its fan base will continue to grow, and over time, more people will come to give it the attention it deserves.
good for protein.